Welcome to episode 16 of the Dynasty Dreamerz podcast. I'm your host, Joe Galloway, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, Luigi Federico.
Hey everyone, long time no see.
Collectively, we are the Dynasty Dreamerz. We go to bed thinking about Dynasty. We dream about Dynasty. We wake up thinking about Dynasty. You get the picture. Ladies and gentlemen, we are available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify in addition to YouTube. On today's show, we're just going to be talking a little, kind of going off the cuff a little bit about the start of the fantasy season. Luigi, it's been a long time since we've done a podcast. The last time we did one was when we got together for the 5-part live, so to speak, recap of the startup we did earlier in the year, which was a lot of fun. We've been needing to do more shows, but just kind of life has just kind of gotten in the way. We've both been pretty busy with work and home life. So we thought we would take this opportunity while Luigi's on vacation this week to get one more out there right before the season starts. Let's start there, Luigi. This is Wednesday. The NFL season starts tomorrow.
Go Lions.
How excited are you?
Oh, I am ecstatic. I've been thinking about this day for the last month easily. We just did a couple of redrafts the other day, and that's always one of my favorite times of year, getting together and doing our redrafts and just knowing that the NFL season is right around the corner and I don't have to worry about missing any more weekends of football. It makes me so happy. This is the best time of year.
Absolutely. I'm gonna use 2-word answer to describe my feelings. Christmas morning. That's what we are embarking on.
Yeah, easily. It doesn't even matter. Obviously, I'm a Patriots fan. The Patriots play on Sunday. Tomorrow, the Lions play the Chiefs. I don't care. I can't wait to sit down and watch football. And normally you don't get this feeling, when basketball season starts, or I'm a huge hockey fan, hockey season starts. I don't really necessarily care as much to watch other teams play, but being able to sit down and watch Patrick Mahomes and Jared Goff destroy the Chiefs tomorrow, it's great.
It's funny that you say that because I'm going up to Richmond, Kentucky to watch Bryce Young's first game with my son. That's where he goes to school. We're big Panthers fans, going up to watch the game with him. And I'm happy to do that, and it's going to be awesome, and I'm looking so forward to it. But there's a downside to that. I have to drive back at some point on Sunday night. So I'm going to be in the car while there's NFL games on TV.
Yep.
And that is a little hard for me to swallow because I loved getting up on Sunday and watching from noon all the way till 11 o'clock at night.
Yep.
But you trust me, Westwood One will be on.
It'll have to be.
For that Sunday night game, I'll be biting my lip on every part. My wife will probably even have to drive.
Yeah.
That's how serious it'll be. We can talk for hours just about our general feelings about the season starting from an NFL standpoint and talk about which teams we think are going to do this and which teams we think are going to do that. But this is a dynasty fantasy football podcast. So we're going to focus on that, even though we might want to do some more fun stuff.
Potentially, there may be some bold predictions going on here.
Right. Let's go to that. Let's start off with we're going to do an exercise. We're just going to go down from each position and answer some questions at each position. But before we do that, Luigi, we got to talk about this real quick. This, to me, is the biggest story in the Dynasty/fantasy community in general right now. What is the status of Travis Kelce one day before kickoff?
Well, I saw a report just a little while ago that said that he has a bone bruise. So it's not any ligament tear or anything like that. It's very possible that he misses the next 2 weeks. I would be extremely surprised to see him suit up for tomorrow's game. So I think everyone can be very prepared to have to find a replacement tight end for tomorrow's game, and even potentially for next week's game. I think having whatever it is, 10 days off in between games will help him a little bit. But at the end of the day, I've personally had a bone bruise before, and I would not be able to suit up. Now, I'm not Travis Kelce, obviously. I'm not a superstar athlete like he is, but I do think somebody of his importance needs to take a little precaution.
Am I wrong in this statement that if Travis Kelce had have went down for the year like we originally thought, a lot of reports out there were saying that he had could potentially have a major ACL tear. Am I wrong in thinking that that would be the most impactful fantasy injury that we've had in a very long time?
Yeah, I mean, I struggle to think of any player that has gone down so late in the preseason. I mean, sometimes you have players go down, week 1 in the preseason, which is horrible, but it's still pretty early on to where not to draft them. I mean, at this point, a lot of drafts have happened.
Or in Dynasty, you have time to find a replacement.
Yeah, exactly. But at this point, a lot of drafts have already happened to where a player that you draft in the first round is gone for the year, and there's no way to recuperate that loss.
Yeah. I just feel like it would be extremely impactful if it had went down that way. Not only is it impactful to the guys who drafted Travis Kelce, because they spent that high draft capital on a position you don't normally spend it on because of the advantage that you get. And then all of a sudden now you don't have the advantage. I think it would be very hard to have a successful fantasy football season if you lost Travis Kelce for the year before week 1. Also, the way he affects Patrick Mahomes.
That's what I was about to say. I think it has a lot more of a fantasy impact for both Mahomes and honestly the rest of the team as well. If you're hoping to find a sleeper in, say, Kadarius Toney or Sky Moore, then I think that's. I don't think that they're going to be able to have the same success with him off the field as they would with him on the field. I struggle to imagine that this offense is going to be very explosive tomorrow. I just do.
Yeah, if I'm being perfectly honest with you, if Travis Kelce isn't on the field tomorrow night, I'm picking the Lions. To upset them.
I just don't see – the Lions were solid enough last year to where I think the Chiefs losing the second most important piece on their offense is just – it's going to be kind of crippling.
Already don't have Chris Jones.
They don't have Chris Jones, so they don't have a solid defense. They don't have anybody behind Travis Kelce who's proven anything. I get
Noah
it.
Gray, baby.
Oh, yeah, Noah Gray. I get it. They have MVS, but can MVS carry a team to a victory? I highly doubt that. Right. And again, we haven't seen MVS produce very consistently with Patrick Mahomes, with Travis Kelce off the field.
Right. All right, let's get into our Dynasty content here. We're just going to go position by position, and we're going to, ask 9 or 10 questions, and we're both going to give our answers to those questions, and it'll kind of be a preview for the season, kind of a preview for what we expect to happen after the season, that sort of thing. And as always, we're going to start with which position?
The quarterback.
Because that's the position that matters in Superflex. We all know that. So first question, Luigi. Not your opinion, personal opinion, but who is the current consensus QB1? In unison, Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah. I definitely think the community is on Mahomes as the QB1. I'm personally, as you are well aware, on the Josh Allen side of being the QB1 in Dynasty, but I cannot argue the fact that Mahomes is probably the best quarterback in the league, most definitely the best quarterback in the league, and has not shown any signs of not being extremely productive.
Right. Okay, question number 2. Who finishes as the quarterback 1 from a production standpoint in 2023? So for me, it is Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow has had one of the most successful first 3 years of any quarterback in NFL history. I think sometimes we forget that Joe Burrow has only been in the league for 3 years because he has already been to the Super Bowl. He has already defeated the Chiefs in a playoff game. He's defeated the Chiefs multiple times since he's been in the league, which I don't believe anyone else has.
I believe they're 3-1 against the Chiefs.
Right.
Joe Burrow-led Bengals are.
Right. I feel like that they're on the cusp of knocking on the door to win a Super Bowl. I think from a personal level, I don't think Joe Burrow has reached his peak yet. I don't think we've seen it. I think we may see it this year. I think with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, hopefully for both of them for a full healthy season, Another year of maturing both in the offense and as a human being. For God's sakes, he's still only like 24, 25
I believe
years
he's
old.
younger than I am.
He's
yeah.
the same age as you. I believe that Joe Burrow will get it done this year. I think that he is your dynasty or your fantasy QB1 in production, and I think he will win the MVP.
I can't argue with that. You know, the offensive line is bolstered up this year. They added Orlando Brown from the Chiefs. They added a reasonable enough receiving tight end in Irv Smith. You know, that offense has just continuously gotten better. And like you said, they're getting more mature. I mean, Jamar Chase has only been in the league for 2 years. This is his third year in the league.
Right.
You're looking at an offense that's just going to continuously get better. The other thing is Joe Mixon had a lot of off the field issues weighing on his mind last year that he isn't going to have this year. So I think that offense is just going to continuously get better, like you said. However, I'm going to say that the QB1 this year finishes as Justin Herbert. That offense also got a lot better. I don't know if we've seen Justin Herbert's ceiling, just like what you said with Joe Burrow. I just think that offense is going to be just so explosive. I think Justin Herbert has one of the higher ceilings in the league, and I mean he's proved that multiple times. I think with the addition of Quentin Johnson, just adding another weapon onto that offense, I think he finishes as a QB1 this year.
I hope that you are right about that for redraft purposes.
Yeah.
As I did buy Justin Herbert.
You bought both Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow.
I did. I bought them in separate leagues.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah. So moving on to question number 3. Who will be the QB1 in February from a dynasty value standpoint? So the season plays out. We don't care about the playoffs because they don't count for fantasy points. I mean, we watch to see sometimes things that happen in the playoffs, and especially the Super Bowl, influences our decisions on this. I get that. But for the most part, we don't really care about the month of January too much. But just to, kind of include all that, let's say February 5th, 6th, 7th, whatever the day after the Super Bowl is, who will be the QB1? Not your opinion, but consensus dynasty value. Who's QB1?
I still think it'll be Mahomes.
Yeah.
As much as I would want to say it could be Joe Burrow, I think Burrow would need to have probably the greatest season a QB has ever had in order for people to start considering him to be more valuable than Mahomes.
Yeah, and that goes for Burrow and Hurts and Herbert and any of the contenders.
I don't think anybody but Burrow would be able to surpass Mahomes. Even if Justin Herbert had the greatest season ever, or if Jalen Hurts had the greatest season ever, I don't think that they've shown as much as Joe Burrow has to be able to surpass Patrick Mahomes.
I'm with you. I just don't see anybody doing enough this year to pass Patrick Mahomes. He's the second, at least since I've been playing Dynasty, which has been about 6 years, he is the poster child of safe in fantasy football. Okay, next up. Who do you have the most QB shares of personally? Now, remember, this is not an indictment on who we think the top guys are at the position, because sometimes, even though I have Patrick Mahomes as my QB1, situations have dictated in the leagues that I'm in that I've only been able to garner one share of him. I'm not happy about that, but that's just the way it is. But these are some guys that we do believe in quite a bit, that we have been able to acquire some nice shares of. And I'll go first here. And of relevant quarterbacks, there's a 4-way tie for me. I have 5 shares each, which is a 25% share stake for me, in Joe Burrow, Bryce Young, Kenny Pickett, and Jordan Love. So Burrow, we already talked about. Obviously, I'm a big fan. Think he is ascending, which is hard considering that you're a top 5 quarterback to say that you're still ascending. Bryce Young, I know that everybody's going to think that this is a homer pick, that why I have so many shares of him. But anyone who's played fantasy football with me for a long time can tell you that I am the last person to be a homer. Luigi will easily tell you that.
For sure.
Hardly ever had any shares of Cam, even though I liked him, just couldn't get them. Hardly ever had any shares of DJ Moore, or you can go on down the list. But The reason why I like Bryce Young so much is because I have always liked smart quarterbacks. Those are the kind of quarterbacks that I prefer. That is why I have been taking Bryce Young over Anthony Richardson in rookie drafts, and I realize that I'm probably the only person out there that's probably been doing that, but I feel conviction about it. I think Bryce Young will have a longer career. I don't know that he will be as productive for the first 2 to 3 years as Anthony Richardson. I know that's a thing, but I don't play dynasty football for 2 to 3 years. I'm in it for the long haul, and I think Bryce Young will have a much better career and will lead me to more championships in the long term than Anthony Richardson will. Next up is Kenny Pickett. He was just cheap. He was cheap as a rookie. He was cheap this year in startups. I believe in him. That's why I have so many shares of Kenny Pickett. Same thing with Jordan Love. I had 6 shares of him going into this season, all of which I picked up basically when he was a rookie, taking him in the late second, early third round. Held on to him this whole time because in my mind, I felt like as soon as he got on the field, he was going to be a guy that produced. We'll find out this year. I did trade 1 share of Jordan Love. I did cash out one of them because I felt like it was a really good deal. But I have held on to 5 of my 6 shares, even after the spike in value. I still believe it in that much. Luigi, who's your most owned relevant quarterback?
Well, my most owned relevant quarterback is Mac Jones. I have 8 shares of him.
Which is about 25% share save.
Yeah, because I'm in 36 total dynasty leagues, and being able to get Mac Jones, and I'm just gonna guess I'm gonna say 14th round, like he gets drafted as a QB3, and I have enough faith in him because I watched him play his rookie year. He had a top 10 QBR for a rookie quarterback. In all of NFL history since they obviously started tracking QBR. There were times where he had a better QBR than Dak Prescott did. I think through week 14 or something, he was performing better up to week 14 than Dak did week 1 through 14. So I do think that he has the capability of reaching his ceiling, which I think is a high-end QB2. I don't think he'll ever be a QB1. I'm not going to be that foolish, but drafting him as a QB3, I do think that he has the upside of way overperforming where he's drafted.
I'm not a Mac Jones guy, but I think it's weird when I hear people say he doesn't have, and not just Mac Jones. I hear people say this about Kenny Pickett too, for example. He doesn't have the upside of a quarterback 1, not even a low quarterback 1. Well, who's to say that if New England ever decided to put some weapons around him, if he's as good as you say he is, why can't he be a low-end QB1?
My problem is they had the opportunity to do that this year twice.
You just don't think they're going to get there?
I don't think that they're ever going to do that for him. I think as long as Belichick is there, they're going to continue to build around the defense and not necessarily worry about the offense. Because they had the ability to draft JSN twice this year. They traded back, and then they drafted Christian Gonzalez. They had the opportunity to put an elite weapon around him, and they didn't. So they don't plan on bringing talents in there to help Mac Jones perform. So I think his ceiling is capped out right around QB 15.
That's fair. Yeah, I get that. All right. So who do you have the most rookie quarterback shares of? We'll start with you this time, Luigi.
I have Bryce Young as my most rookie quarterback shares. I don't think there's a lot to talk about here. I know the dynasty community is a lot higher on Anthony Richardson than I am. I just struggle to imagine that Anthony Richardson will be able to outperform Bryce Young over the next 5 to 6 years. I think the longer Bryce Young is in the league, the better he's going to get. The Panthers took him with the number 1 overall pick for a reason. I wasn't a huge fan of Anthony Richardson in college. Where he is in Indianapolis, I think he'll be able to perform better than he would in other places, but I still always found myself in a position of being able to draft Bryce Young, and I just accepted the QB1, in my opinion, of the class.
I obviously agree, as Bryce Young is tied for my most shares total at 5. I have a 25% share stake in him. I have a 20% share stake in CJ Stroud. So I have 4 shares of him as opposed to 5 of Bryce Young. And
is that because you were drafting at the 4 or because you were drafting at the 2 and you just went with Stroud?
No, I mean, I went with I only had the 102 twice this year, and I took Bryce Young both times.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, I will tell you this. Later in the process, after I accumulated several shares of Bryce Young, if I had have been in that 2 spot, I would have hedged my bets a little bit. I would have went with Anthony Richardson.
Right.
But I was never in that position after those first 2 drafts.
Mm-hmm.
I never had the second overall pick again. Wasn't able to trade into it. And quite honestly, I do like to hedge my bets, but I'm not likely to trade up to hedge my bets.
Yeah,
you know what
definitely
I mean?
not. There's no reason to do it like that.
So, no, I never took C.J. Stroud over Anthony Richardson, but I had a lot of 103s, 104s. I don't think I ever took Stroud at 103, but I definitely took him at 104, 105. Even had a situation where he dropped to 106 and I took him, which
insane value. So you had to.
Value. I had to.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to take Dalton Kincaid over C.J. Stroud, even in the tight end.
Because probably Jason and Gibbs both went ahead of him.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I do have 4 shares of C.J. Stroud. I do not have any shares of Anthony Richardson. I kind of wish I had one. I like to have 1 share of guys that I'm not high on, just in case I'm wrong. So. But I didn't end up with any of them, and I'm not super upset about that. But I would certainly trade C.J. Stroud plus in some of my leagues to get a share of Anthony Richardson.
I'm not sure I have any shares either, to be honest with you. I'm pretty sure I have 7 shares of C.J. Stroud. I have 9 shares of Bryce Young, and I'm not sure I have any shares of Anthony Richardson.
Did also end up with 4 shares of Will Levis just because I'm a draft quarterback.
When you get to the 111 and the 112 and he's there, you're just like, why not?
Especially in like a 14-team league.
Yeah.
It's really hard to lay off of a quarterback that you think could potentially be a starter in this league.
If he's a starter, he gains value.
I got a lot of my shares in the mid-second. I mean, early on, he was going at where you're talking about, like the 111, 112. But I did a lot of rookie drafts later in the summer because of circumstances we won't talk about on here. But it seems like the later as we went in the process, the farther he fell. So I have some mid-second shares of Will Levis because of that. All right. Question number 6. Name some quarterbacks you have few or no shares of. So I'll start with this one. Of my personal top 20 at the quarterback position in my personal rankings, there are 4 quarterbacks that I have 0 shares of. They are Lamar Jackson, Justin Fields, Anthony Richardson, and Daniel Jones. You can see a theme here.
A lot of running quarterbacks.
I'm not a big fan of them. I want to see the passing capability before I invest in these guys. That's why I do have a share of Jalen Hurts. He went out last year. He proved that he can sling the rock. So I probably miss out on those cheaper shares of guys like this, but I'm willing to take that risk because I think more often than not that these guys don't work out for the long term. Now, Lamar Jackson is a guy who I do respect at this point. He is my QB7. I didn't get a lot of early shares of Lamar Jackson because I didn't believe in him in the early going. I was wrong. And I haven't gotten any since then because I'm still taking guys like I'm always going to take Burrow, Herbert, and Lawrence over Lamar Jackson. I'm also going to take Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase over them. So the earliest I'm taking Lamar Jackson is like the 109. And in most drafts, he's just not there. Justin Fields and Anthony Richardson, I don't know any other way to say it. I just don't believe those guys. I don't think that they're going to be successful over the long term. I will say that I believe more in Justin Fields than I do Anthony Richardson. I can't wrap my head around the fact that a guy that was barely over 50% completion percentage in college is going to be able to progress enough in the pros to be a consistent quarterback in that league over the long term. I think Anthony Richardson might have a 2 to 3 year window where he scores some decent fantasy points, but then I think that's it. I think that's over after that. Whenever the Colts figure out that this guy cannot succeed throwing the football, I think they'll get rid of him. That's my personal opinion. Feel the same way about Justin Fields. I don't think I feel as strongly about Justin Fields because at least we saw him be productive in college. I haven't seen that in the pros. I still feel like that we have not seen anywhere close to any decent NFL throwing ability from Justin Fields, but we have seen it at least at some point in his career. Daniel Jones, I've just never been a Daniel Jones guy. I thought he was overdrafted at 6 overall whenever he was taken. He has never showed me very much. He's not that athletic of a guy. He doesn't throw the football that well. He hasn't had targets over his career, many good targets over the course of his career. I get that. It does mystify me sometimes how he manages to score points in fantasy football.
He's elusive.
I guess. But just not a believer in Daniel Jones. Honestly, most of these, for all but one of them, it's because I'm not a believer in these guys. The guy that I am a believer in, it's because I was late to the party and haven't been able to get any shares of him since then.
I don't know exactly all of my QBs that I have the least amount of shares of or no shares of. I'm not sure I have many shares of Justin Fields. I do have quite a few shares of Daniel Jones and Lamar Jackson, mostly because when I draft a quarterback, I'm not just going to trade him away for cheap. Right. Daniel Jones is one of those guys that I was able to get kind of middle of the round, kind of similar to Will Levis. Yeah. I was able to get him there, and I'm just not going to trade him away for cheap because he is a starting quarterback in the league until proven otherwise. But the quarterback that I only have one share of is Patrick Mahomes. Whenever I'm at the 101, I take Josh Allen. It's funny because the only league that I have Patrick Mahomes in, I came second place last year, and I upgraded from Lamar Jackson to Patrick Mahomes. I paid a lot to do so, but I felt like upgrading from Lamar to Mahomes kind of put me over that hump. Yeah. And that's just something that you have to do to acquire Patrick Mahomes. You have to give the farm and the beach house for Patrick Mahomes, you know, just to acquire him. And I was willing to do that in that league because I felt like I had the depth and the capability of doing it. But when I go into startups, you know, if I was to go into a startup tomorrow and I had the 101, I would probably consider Patrick Mahomes, but not necessarily because I have him as my QB1. But like you've said multiple times, I like to hedge my bets as well. Right. In the case that I'm wrong, or in the case that Josh Allen gets hurt, I don't want every team of mine to just be done. Because when you lose a first-round draft pick, like we talked about Kelsey earlier, it kind of cripples your team for that year.
Yeah, yeah. So now question number 7. Who will be the biggest riser at the quarterback position?
Well, I'm going to be a little bit of a homer here and say...
Let me preface this by saying this is the guy we expect to rise the most between right now and February, a few days after Super Bowl.
Yeah, I'm going to be a little bit of a homer and say Mac Jones. Like I said a little while ago, he did have a good rookie season. And then last year, he was given just that. I can't even call him an offensive coordinator because I'm pretty sure I could call plays better than he did. With all due respect to Matt Patricia, he's a fine defensive coordinator. He should have been nowhere near the offensive side of the ball. Now Mac has been given an actual offensive coordinator. His offense, I guess you could say, has gotten better, although in my personal opinion, it got worse. He did add Kayshon Boutte, which, you know, will be the wide receiver 1 come next year. So, but
we'll leave it alone.
But you know, he's being drafted as the QB 27 right now, and I think his ceiling is right around QB 15. I think that's where he's going to end up come February.
So you think who does he move ahead? Just give me some names.
You know, Jared Goff. He probably moves. You know, he'll move ahead of people like Sam Howell. Sam Howell's being drafted ahead of him right now.
Right. Desmond Ridder.
Geno Smith definitely. I don't think Desmond Ridder is being drafted ahead of him right now. I think Desmond Ridder is more closer to QB 30. But yeah, like Aaron Rodgers, you know, some of the older deteriorating, you know, maybe Russell Wilson, Derek Carr, maybe.
You know,
Okay.
those type of guys, the guys who are declining in age, I think Mac vaults ahead of them because I think he goes out and shows where he did in his rookie year.
Okay. So I had two that I wanted to choose. It was very hard to decide between the two of them. But I will say the second guy that I'm not going to talk about is Jordan Love. But a lot of the reasons that you will hear about the guy I am going to talk about also apply to Jordan Love. So the guy I am going to talk about is Kenny Pickett. And I know that this is not going to be a popular opinion in some of the groups that I'm part of, as I've discussed this in group chat in length in some of them. And very few people agree with me on a take like this. But I just think Kenny Pickett has enough talent. He's not the most talented guy in the league. I'm not saying that. But he has enough talent with all the resources that the Pittsburgh Steelers have put around him with Deontay Johnson and George Pickens. And I think Allen Robinson is an underrated pickup this year. I really do. Pat Freiermuth being one of the top 10 tight ends in the league. They spent resources, draft capital, and free agent dollars to bolster their offensive line. They have, for my money, the best current coach in the NFL. If you don't think he's the best, he's one of the top 2 or 3 guys, no doubt about it. The franchise as a whole is probably, over the duration of the entire league, has been the most successful, best well-run franchise out there. I think that matters. I just think that he's been put in a position to succeed. And I think that he probably is a little bit more talented than most people give him credit for. And I had these feelings already. And I'm not a big one to buy into preseason. I'm not. How many times this year have you heard me say preseason doesn't matter?
At least 15.
Yeah, and I really don't believe it matters. But the one thing from this preseason, because it was so consistent, every drive that Kenny Pickett was involved in, they scored a touchdown, right? Mm-hmm. And he looked good on every single drive. Because I already believed that he was going to have this big ascension this year, I feel like that maybe means a little bit because it was so consistent. It's not like he went out there and looked really good 2 out of 3 times or 2 out of 4 times. It was every time he was on the field. Every time that first team offense was on the field, they looked awesome. Now they'll probably crumble like little bitches come Sunday, but I don't think so. I think that this is going to be a great year for Kenny Pickett. I'm not predicting an MVP. I'm not predicting an All-Pro or a Pro Bowl or anything like that. But in terms of dynasty value, I think he can climb over a lot of these guys because I do think he'll be very productive. And some of these guys are going to drop, even if they're super productive.
Like Rodgers.
Like
Wilson.
Like Kirk Cousins, for goodness sakes. And I love Kirk Cousins, but he's getting long in the tooth. He's going to start losing dynasty value just because of his age. Jared Goff to a lesser degree. Mm-hmm. I do also think he can move ahead of guys like Daniel Jones because I think Kenny Pickett might have a better year than Daniel Jones, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. I think Tua Tagovailoa because of the injury concerns. Honest to goodness, one more concussion, and I think Tua Tagovailoa is out of the league. I'm not wishing that for him. I hope the kid plays for another decade. I personally just don't see it. So I think Kenny Pickett can move ahead of him. I think that I'm going to get into some ones that people are really going to disagree with. I think if Anthony Richardson is as average as I think he's going to be, I think Kenny Pickett could be ahead of him in dynasty value this time next year.
Or Fields.
I think that's a long shot with Fields, but I think it's possible. Mm-hmm. I definitely think that he can move ahead of C.J. Stroud because I think that C.J. Stroud is going to suffer this offseason from the same thing that Kenny Pickett suffered from last year. The first year as a quarterback in a system, let's be honest, it's the first year in the league for this system. It's first year for Stroud in general. I think Kenny Pickett will do enough. C.J. Stroud will have a very average to bad year as a rookie, and I think Kenny Pickett will move ahead of him in dynasty value. I don't know if it'll always stay that way, but I think that's where we'll be at in February. This one will be really controversial, but I firmly believe that Kyler Murray will not play a game this season for the Arizona Cardinals. He will get traded. Who knows where he lands? It could be anywhere at this point. Well, not anywhere, but it could be a number of locations with teams with quarterback issues. I think that there is a possibility that if Kyler Murray doesn't play this year and he gets a less than desirable landing spot, that Kenny Pickett could move ahead of him in value this time in February. Of course, I guess in February we won't technically know where he lands, but you get what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, Kenny Pickett has too small of hands. I don't agree with anything you just said.
Well, I believe in Kenny Pickett has too small hands almost about as much as I believe in Bryce Young is too short. That's how I feel about those two things.
They don't matter.
Not really. Okay, who's going to fall the most amongst the quarterbacks in dynasty value from now to February? You're up first, Luigi.
I would have to personally say Justin Fields. You make a very good argument with Kyler Murray. I just think that Kyler Murray will at least still be a starter next year. And if Justin Fields performs the way that I worry that he's going to perform, then I'm not sure that the Bears won't be looking to replace him in the draft. So I think because right now, he's being drafted as a QB 10, maybe QB 9, somewhere around there. I don't have him nearly that high, but I think that's roughly where the dynasty community values him. I think it's very possible that he won't even be a starter next year. I think Kyler will at least be traded somewhere. Kyler could be traded to the Bears next year, for all I know. You know what I mean?
That would be something.
So I think Justin Fields has the most to lose while he is being drafted where he's being drafted.
So, of all the guys that we've talked about, that I've talked about not having a lot of faith in, I think Fields could fall some. I think Anthony Richardson could fall some. I think Murray falls for the fact that he's not probably going to play in my mind. So I'm going to go with a different answer. Maybe this guy doesn't fall more than these other guys, but maybe he falls just as much. I just think it's going to be a rough year for C.J. Stroud. I like C.J. Stroud long term. I think once Houston builds some things around him, which might take a while considering
they don't have
traded their first next
mm-hmm.
year. I think once they put some things around him, I think C.J. Stroud can be a top 15-ish. Get back to where his value is right now.
Where's his value right now? Where would you say?
I think his value, he's somewhere between 12 and 15 on the list. I think he's going to fall down from that. I think guys like Pickett and Love are going to move ahead of him. I think veterans like that give you 2 to 3 years, like Cousins and Goff, could even move ahead of C.J. Stroud. But I do think Stroud will eventually get the value back, like I said. But in this February, I think will be a good time for those of us who believe in C.J. Stroud to go buy him. I think he'll be cheaper than he is right now.
I definitely think he'll be cheaper than he is right now. Because like you said, I don't think that they're going to have a great year. I think they're going to be mostly a running offense. And who knows? I mean, Nico Collins and Tank Dell could be great wide receivers for Stroud. I'm not saying they'll be good wide receivers, but I think they could be great wide receivers for Stroud. He could very well stay where he's valued at. But I agree with you. I don't see that happening. I definitely think they're going to be one of the more disappointing offenses in the league to where he himself is extremely disappointing.
So let's finish up the quarterbacks with a bold prediction. Let's start with you.
My bold prediction, we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier. I might have hinted at it a little bit. I think Justin Herbert has the best year for a quarterback ever. I think he throws the most yards. I think he throws the most touchdowns. And I think
better than the Manning year from
betting than the Manning year. You got to remember there is one more game.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think he'll have better per game stats, but I think overall, I think it's possible that he can achieve the 5,600 yards and 55 touchdowns because there is 17 games as opposed to 16 games. So yeah, I think that's my bold prediction.
Man, I'm really struggling with this, and I don't have one as of right now. Some of the things maybe I've already talked about might be considered a little bold,
like Burrow winning MVP and such.
With Pickett ascending and so on. So maybe I feel like I've already covered the bold prediction part. But one of them's just kind of sprouted into my head, and this is more of not a dynasty from a dynasty value standpoint. So I'm going to go a little different with this. My bold prediction is that Patrick Mahomes does not finish in the top 5 in production this year. I think with Kelsey being out for a couple of games and a wide receivers core of who's who, I think that we might see the worst Patrick Mahomes year that we've seen to date.
That offensive line is pretty decimated. They
Yeah.
didn't resign some people. Their defense isn't good. So I guess that could actually help the offense in terms of if the defense continuously gets 3 and outs, then the offense is just going to be on the field more. But honestly, I think being on the field more is kind of what helps Patrick Mahomes in production. Yeah. So I agree with that statement. I'm not sure that Patrick Mahomes has enough around him. And that's kind of weird to say because he is Patrick Mahomes. But there are other quarterbacks, Herbert, Burrow, Hurts, that have such a better offense around them.
Yeah. And this isn't so much a bold prediction, but I would be very surprised if the top 6, the consensus top 6, is not exactly the same this time next year. Maybe not in number for number, but I think Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, Hurts, Herbert, and Trevor Lawrence will be your top 6 in February, just like they are now. All right, let's move on to the running backs. Luigi, who is your current current running back 1 in Dynasty value? Or not yours. Who do you think the consensus is?
I don't think any other name can be said but Bijan Robinson.
Absolutely.
Right now.
Let's move on to number 2. Who finishes as RB1 in production this season?
I have been saying for the last few weeks, maybe a couple of months now, that I think the RB1 will be Nick Chubb. I think losing Kareem Hunt is just going to add to his production. He was hurt last year, and I'm pretty sure he still finished as a top 10 RB. I don't think any other running back has the ceiling that Nick Chubb has. I think that offense is going to get better from last year, even a couple of years ago, and I think he has the capability of producing the most rushing yards and the most touchdowns.
So I think that it's finally time for the fantasy community to start respecting Austin Eckler for the awesome player that he is. He seemingly is never hurt. Am I right about that, Luigi?
He was hurt a little bit last year, but that's the first time.
So he's missed like a couple of
3 games max,
4 years or something. Mm-hmm. And he's consistent because of that, and because he's also very, very good, very, very
Definitely
productive on a decent amount of touches. But it's not like he's a super workhorse back or anything. He finished last year as the RB1 by a decent margin, like 3 or 4 points over the next highest person, I think. He was like 2nd or 3rd the year before, and third or 4th the year before that. I find it really hard to bet against Austin Eckler. The only guy that is in the conversation for me, if he plays a full healthy season, Christian McCaffrey could get there. I could see Nick Chubb as well. I just feel like there's more injury concerns with him. He's not the pass catching threat that Austin Eckler is. And if your theory on Justin Herbert is right, you got to think that Austin Eckler is going to get a decent amount of that.
Definitely. I think the offense of the Cleveland Browns is going to be better than it was a few years ago. And if I'm not mistaken, a few years ago, he finished as the RB3. Nick Chubb did.
He's had some big years. Yeah.
So I think he can produce 1,500 rushing yards and 15 touchdowns. And that's not to say that I don't think Austin Eckler can't either, because you're 100% correct. I think Austin Eckler has the second best, with Christian McCaffrey being the third. Honestly, I could really see Christian McCaffrey having 1,000. Like, it's not entirely out of the question that happens. He has that capability. If he stays healthy, yeah. Especially with the 17-game season. I definitely – any of those 3 guys could finish as the RB1. I just think I'm kind of going as I don't want to say bold prediction, but I'm kind of going as, one of those out of, off the forehead type guesses, and I'm gonna say it's Nick Chubb because I don't necessarily think very many people would put him. I think a lot of people have Bijan Robinson or Christian McCaffrey or Austin Eckler. Not very many people have Austin Eckler. Like you said, he's very underrated. He's very disrespected.
Very disrespected.
He is constantly an RB1, constantly top 5 RB.
And I think in redraft, people are coming around to it.
Yeah,
but his value in Dynasty is still
atrocious.
It's not where it should be. Okay. QB1 in February consensus. I think this one's pretty easy.
I still think it'll be Bijan.
Bijan would have to have just a terrible rookie season for this not to be the case, right?
Right.
Yeah. Most running back shares. Who are you own the most of here?
I own 7 shares of Breece Hall.
Well, that's nice.
I kind of was drafting him around the 101 and 102 last year. I always considered him to be the running back one of the class. And then when he got hurt, I was able to trade other running backs. I want to say I'd made like a Kenneth Walker and a second type trade for Bijan Robinson last year. And like those type of trades I was able to do, and I was perfectly happy with that. I think one league I even got Breece Hall and a first for like Nick Chubb last year. Like I was just able to acquire him for extremely cheap. And I was perfectly happy and willing to do so.
Well, my most owned running back by quite a bit. Of all the top 20 at the position for me, I have double as many shares of this guy as the next closest guy, and it is Jahmyr Gibbs. Part of that was circumstance and having a lot of picks in that 4 to 6, actually 3 to 6 range, depending on the league. And just drafting a lot of Jahmyr Gibbs because he was the best guy available and at a position that I needed. Because traditionally, as we talked about on the show, I generally get my running backs in the rookie drafts because I don't take them until I'm ready to win. So that's part of it. The reason why I have so many shares of Jahmyr Gibbs. Also, part of it is I do really believe in Jahmyr Gibbs. The Lions believe in Jahmyr Gibbs, maybe a little bit too much. To the point where they decided to take him with the 12th overall pick when he probably would have been easily available when they picked at 19th or maybe even in the second round. Who knows? But I have, with the issues with Jonathan Taylor and with Breece Hall starting the year a little bit hurt, I actually still have Hall ahead of him. But I've moved Jahmyr Gibbs because of age and other factors like that. I've moved him all the way up to running back 3 on my list, which I know for a lot of people would be very high. And no, I don't expect him to outproduce McCaffrey or Eckler or even guys like Jacobs this year. I don't expect that. But as far as dynasty value goes, that's where I have him as running back 3 right now. Okay, so moving on to most rookie running back shares. Obviously mine's Jahmyr Gibbs, so we'll just move right along to Luigi here.
Mine is Roschon Johnson. I've been a big fan of him. He was pretty productive behind Bijan Robinson in Texas. And then he was drafted to an extremely heavy run-first offense. And I was able to get him, middle of the second, late of the second in a lot of drafts. And I think he can easily outperform that landing spot. So I have 7 shares of Roschon Johnson.
Yeah. I love Roschon in his position. I love where you get him in drafts. Unfortunately, I was not in a position in any of the drafts I was in with all the – I had 40-plus firsts and like 30 some odd seconds. I was never in position to get Roschon Johnson. There was always either someone better that I had higher on the list or he went in a patch of – he got taken right before me.
Mm-hmm.
So, unfortunately, I don't have any shares of that guy. I'm kind of upset about that. So name some running backs that you have few shares of. We'll start with you here.
I have 1 share of Travis Etienne. I have 1 share of Nick Chubb. It's just about circumstance, me preferring other running backs over them. A lot of people are higher on Travis Etienne than I am. And it's just, like I'll say it again, like there are some trades where I would be able to trade Nick Chubb for Breece Hall in a first in a league. And I couldn't turn down that value because I still have Breece Hall higher than Chubb right now, on my ranking. So being able to get a first for a running back that I felt like is worse in value and a better running back, I couldn't not accept that. So whenever I have these guys and I send out offers because I'm not competing, or I'm able to get so much better value in return. So and like I said, ETN, I've never been very high on ETN. The Dynasty community probably has him as a top 10 RB. and I'm not sure that that's where I have him. So I always look for value whenever it comes to running backs, especially. I'm always looking for value.
So the technical answer for me is Tony Pollard and Nick Chubb. Those are the two guys in the my top 20 that I have no shares of. With Chubb, it is absolutely not about not liking him because I love Nick Chubb. Just for whatever reason, haven't been able to pick up shares from him. The guy on my win now teams that the guy I don't need running backs or the person that has Chubb doesn't want to come off of them.
And like in starter drafts, I know you prefer to go quarterbacks in the area that he gets drafted at. So there that has a lot to do with it.
I'm never going to get Nick Chubb in the startup. Yeah, it's just not going to happen. Tony Pollard, I didn't really like him before this year because I didn't like the dynamic with Zeke. Even though last year it worked out really well for Tony Pollard, Tony Pollard is my running back 13 this year. And I might even move him up a little bit higher if I'd updated my rankings recently. But I certainly wasn't going to – I didn't have any shares of him going into the season. I certainly wasn't going to buy any shares of him with the extended price now. So that's the technical answer. The real answer for me on who do I not have very many shares of at running back is, well, all of them. Because the only time that I invest in running backs, high-value running backs, is when I'm ready to win.
All of them but Jahmyr Gibbs.
Well, Jahmyr Gibbs still, like I said, all those teams where I drafted Jahmyr Gibbs are teams that I expect to win now with. I would pass on Jahmyr Gibbs for basically any of the top 3 quarterbacks, and maybe even JSN if I was win later. So a lot of times, a lot of my running back shares are of younger guys like Breece Hall. I have 3 shares of, which is one of my highest share stakes. Kenneth Walker, another young guy, because I get most of my running back shares of high value guys I get in the rookie drafts. That's just my strategy. I don't like to carry veteran running backs on bad teams to just lose seasons of value on them. I like to get those guys out of there. So that's why I end up only having 1 share of guys. Up until recently, I traded for my first and second share of Christian McCaffrey. I had no shares of him, but I got couple of leagues where I had a bunch of draft picks that were going to be spent on Jordan Addison and Quentin Johnson
for the 15th time.
For like my 7th and 8th shares. So I traded those shares to go get me a running back. You know, Eckler. I've got a couple of shares of. Just got those veteran running backs. I just don't carry them on my teams very often unless I'm ready to win the championship. Bijan, unfortunately, is another guy I only have 1 share of. Because guess how many shares I had of the 101?
1.
There you go. All right, let's look at biggest riser at the position. So who will be the running back who gains the most dynasty value between today and middle of February, Luigi?
I think my biggest riser is going to end up being Roschon Johnson. Like I said, he went to an extremely heavy running team. And you're able to get him in the middle of the 2nd round right now. I think by the beginning of February, he'll probably be that team's starter for the foreseeable future. So he'll go from, I don't know where people have him ranked right now. Let's just say RB 45 is probably where some people would rank him right around. He'll probably end up being an RB 2.
This one's difficult for me. Risers at the running back position are really hard to predict, in my opinion. A lot of times it has to do with injury and, just opportunity. And sometimes you don't know where that opportunity is going to be. But a guy that comes to mind that I think could shoot up the dynasty value board is Kendre Miller. I think that Kamara's days in New Orleans might be somewhat numbered. I don't think Jamal Williams is a long-term answer. I think Kendre Miller showed in college that he does have running and pass catching ability. He might be the 3rd best combination of that in this year's rookie class behind, the 2 studs. Personally, I think he probably was. If I had to, I know most people would have Charbonnet ahead of Miller. As far as, sheer talent, but I kind of think it's Kendre Miller, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. I like the situation better than that of a guy like Charbonnet's, because I think after this year he'll definitely have less competition for carries. So I'm not real. What's the word I'm looking for? I don't really have a lot of strong confidence in this pick because I'm not very good at picking running back risers. But Kendre Miller is a guy that I think could shoot up the board.
Yeah. I definitely like Kendre Miller. I think coming out of college before the combine, I think a lot of people had him as their RB3 or RB4. And, he was drafted to a team that they thought already had their starting running back in Alvin Kamara. But since then, a lot of wavering has happened. It's very possible that we go into 2024 with Kendre Miller being the RB1 on the Saints.
Yeah. Who's going to fall the most?
I don't think any running back can fall as far as Kenneth Walker can if Charbonnet ends up being what a lot of people suspect him to be. If he comes in and takes over that backfield, because let's face it, I was a huge Kenneth Walker fan, and I even said in some podcasts probably that I don't worry about Zach Charbonnet, and I really don't. I don't. Yeah. But the Dynasty community in general is what we're talking about, and the Dynasty community in general already has Kenneth Walker falling, and if Charbonnet comes in and is better than Kenneth Walker, I mean, Kenneth Walker's probably a top 10 running back right now. If Charbonnet comes in and is a better running back, it doesn't shock me if he falls out of being an RB2, period. He could go from being a top 10 RB to a 30, 35, right around there. Right. You know what I mean? So I think he would be the biggest one to worry about.
For me, this might be cheating, but I think it's absolutely Derrick Henry. This is, potentially the last ride for Derrick Henry, I think, especially from a dynasty value standpoint. He gets that big, ugly 3-0 number placed next to his name next year, and that's basically dynasty death for running backs. And, he's probably being taken somewhere between 17 to 20 right now in startup drafts. I think he could drop into the 30s. I think you could see guys like Kendre Miller, Charbonnet, Rochon, any of these guys that we're talking about.
His backup, Tajay Spears.
Tajay Spears might be worth more than Derrick Henry in February. Mm-hmm. If he shows any flash at all, I think you could see that, because I think we all know that the Titans are going to move away from Derrick Henry sooner rather than later. Yep. So that's my answer on that. And that, like I said, does feel a little bit like cheating. Bold prediction for the running backs. What would your bold prediction be?
My bold prediction is that Roschon Johnson finishes as the rookie RB2.
Behind Bijan.
Bijan, yes. I have Bijan and then Roschon Johnson.
I really hope for my 6 shares of Jahmyr Gibbs that is false. But it is a bold prediction, so I will accept it.
What about you, Joe?
Running back's so hard for me. Every single position, every single question is so hard for me because I'm just not invested in these guys because I know they're so short term. But looking at the list, if I had to make a bold prediction right now, okay, I got one. DeAndre Swift is better than we think he is. And what I mean by that is I think that everyone expects for Kenneth Gainwell and Rashad Penny to at some point take over the starting job or at least cut into DeAndre Swift's production enough that making DeAndre Swift basically irrelevant. Mm-hmm. Yes. I still believe in DeAndre Swift's talent, even though
the Lions didn't.
Mm-hmm. And that's, whenever Ron and I had this discussion way back in the 3rd or 4th episode of the podcast when we did our first mock draft, and I told him that his taking DeAndre Swift was in the 3rd round was crazy. I still believe that, but I think he can be better than where he's at right now. I think DeAndre Swift can be potentially a high running back 2 if Philadelphia uses him in the right way. I think the biggest problem in Detroit was that they weren't using him correctly. And I'm a little hesitant to make this prediction because Philadelphia certainly didn't use Miles Sanders right, in my opinion.
Boston Scott took touchdowns.
Yeah. So I don't, again, with all my other running back predictions, I don't feel insanely safe with this one, but I think that DeAndre Swift's getting just a tad bit more hate than he deserves right now. All right, moving on to the wide receivers. Let's just answer question number 1, 2, and 3 in unison. The current quarterback 1, did consensus in Dynasty.
Wide receiver 1, just to clarify.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Current wide receiver 1 in Dynasty, who finishes at wide receiver 1 in production, and wide receiver 1 in February Dynasty value will be Justin Jefferson. Come on.
No, well, okay, so I have Justin Jefferson, answer 1, and answer 3. But if you honestly believe that Joe Burrow has an MVP-type season, then I think it's quite possible that Jamar Chase finishes as the wide receiver 1 in production.
It's possible, sure it is, but he doesn't have to because Higgins is also there.
Sure, I think that is just in my redraft rankings, I have Jamar Chase being the wide receiver 1 in production this year.
Oh,
but it's not completely out of the question for me to think that 1, 2, and 3 in both of these is Justin Jefferson. It's just personally.
Oh, it is for me as well.
Yeah. I think it's possible that Jamar Chase finishes as the wide receiver 1 in production.
Right on. So most wide receiver shares. Who have you got the most wide receiver shares?
For veterans, because I'm going to do veterans, and then I'm going to put my rookie as the next question. But my veteran that I have the most shares of is Christian Kirk. I have 6 of those. Okay. I think I was taking him at the end of the first, early second in rookie drafts. I think his rookie draft was actually the first time I ever played Dynasty, if I'm not mistaken. His was the first rookie draft of mine.
Mm-hmm. It was.
So
I was in that league.
Yeah, I remember. So I think that was honestly my only share of him in a rookie draft, but I was still consistently getting him around that same value in startup auctions and startup drafts.
Yeah. For me, it's Amon-Ra St. Brown. I have 4 shares of him, which is a 20% share stake for me. Love me some Amon-Ra. Got in on him when he was cheap, before you had to pay a ridiculous amount for him. Got him for 3 shares that way. He is currently my wide receiver 5. Also got a share in a trade with you in a startup draft we did this year. So, yeah, it's Amon-Ra for me. But I have a lot. Wide receiver is a position where going down the list, like two shares of Jefferson, 2 shares of Chase, only 1 of Lamb. That's mostly circumstance. I love CeeDee Lamb. 3 of AJ, 3 of Garrett Wilson. 3. I'm invested in all of these guys.
Yeah.
It's just happens to be where they fall in startup drafts. I draft wide receivers over running backs, so I have shares of everybody except for T. Higgins for some reason. And some of the veteran guys I don't have shares of because I've traded them off of win later teams and so on and so forth. But the top guys, I have quite a few shares of the younger guys. Next up, most rookie shares of wide receivers.
I had the most shares of Jordan Addison. I have 7 of them. I think in drafts I was able to. I would be at like the 105, 106, not really need a quarterback. And people who needed quarterbacks like 107, 108 would be like, would offer me a first in 2024 even to move up to get their quarterback. And when I don't need a quarterback, and while I don't want to lose out on value of quarterbacks, I felt like getting 2 firsts was good enough value in return. So I was able to trade back a lot. And also I just had the 107, 108 mostly right around there. And in non-tight end premium, there's no reason to take anybody but either QJ or Jordan Addison. And I believe more in Jordan Addison than I do in Quentin Johnson.
Well, same here. I have 3 shares of JSN. I've actually traded a share of JSN. Obviously, I have him higher than Addison and QJ. but I have more shares of both Addison at 5 and QJ at 4, just because I had a lot more picks in the 7 to 9 range than I did in the 5-6 range. So lots of shares of Addison and QJ for that reason. Only 3 shares of Flowers.
I don't know if I have, but maybe 1 share of Flowers. Really? I just, whenever I was going to draft Flowers, it was probably tied in premium, and I would rather like Laporta. I'm not a Flowers guy, and I'm not a Baltimore wide receiver guy. So just 2 strikes against him.
Yeah, I get that. Name some wide receivers that you have very few to no shares of.
Well, like I just said, Zay Flowers. I think I only have like 1 share of Jerry Jeudy, maybe 1 or 2 shares of CeeDee Lamb. Not because I don't like CeeDee Lamb, but whenever I'm in drafts, I just feel like I prefer taking quarterbacks in that position.
Right. So for me, it's of the top 20, it's T. Higgins. Interestingly, I just don't like him as much as other people do. I would rather have a Drake London or a DK Metcalf or Devonta Smith over T. Higgins. I don't think that's always the case with everybody. So I end up getting priced out of T. Higgins in a lot of startup drafts. Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, have no shares of those guys. As I've said, I've had shares of those guys in the past, but whenever I break a team down, I get rid of the veterans. I just
definitely
I ship them. I don't just ship them for nothing, but whenever I get a deal that I feel is good, I ship them. Don't have any shares of Michael Pittman. I don't care for him now because of Anthony Richardson. Had nothing against him before this year. Just didn't happen to have any shares of him. But everybody, all the other top wide receivers, I have at least 1 or 2 shares of. All right. Biggest riser at the position, wide receiver. So Luigi and I have the same riser here. I'm going to let him talk about Christian Watson first, and then I'll chime in.
Yeah, he performed pretty solid last year. He started off really slow, but once he finally caught his groove, where he scored, 6 touchdowns in 4 games or something like that. Like I don't know of anybody else on that offense that Jordan Love will be throwing to, and I think his ceiling is extremely high. I think he's probably being drafted somewhere around wide receiver 18, maybe somewhere around there, and I think it's highly possible that he vaults into a top 12 wide receiver. I think he has the capability of it. It would not shock me to see him go for 80, 1,310, somewhere around there this year. And I think a lot of people are going to start drafting him a lot higher than they are right now.
I'm going to add on to just some things I didn't hear you say. I would add Jordan Love to that list because I believe in Jordan Love. I think that's part of the reason. I would also mention that I fully expect him to move ahead of guys for the reason of him being so young, and I expect him to be better. He's going to move ahead of the Stephon Diggs of the world, the Adams, the Cup. I think he'll move ahead of Tyreek Hill. Going past the veterans, I feel like he'll have a more productive year than T. Higgins. And whenever you're the number 1 on the team versus the number 2, you're going to move ahead of that guy. We know that. I think he maybe even moves ahead of Jackson Smith and Jigba. Right now, JSN is clearly ahead of him in value. Drake London's also ahead of him in value. I can see him moving ahead of that guy.
Yeah.
I can see him moving ahead of DK Metcalf because I think there's going to be a lot of competition for targets in Seattle. I could see Christian Watson potentially, hear that word, potentially, being into the top 10 in dynasty value come February. I see a scenario where that happens. His end of last year, where he just seemingly came out of nowhere and just caught fire, reminds me so much of what Amon-Ra did as a rookie a couple of years ago, where he was basic for the first 12 weeks, came out of nowhere, caught fire. And I
never looked back.
Amon-Ra got no respect for that. And he still had no value. At least Watson's in that top 20 range, but I still think maybe we're undervaluing what he did at the end of last season. And I know everyone's going to say it was touchdown based. Well, a lot of Amon-Ra's was touchdown based too. He had one or two touchdowns.
It's mostly about confidence.
Yeah.
As a rookie, you got to have the confidence. The reason that players like Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson were able to be so good in their rookie years was they already had that. I don't want to say cockiness, but confidence about them. They knew going onto the field, they were the guys for this offense.
Yeah.
And I mean, they proved it. They came out and proved it. And Christian Watson, it did take him a little while to get that confidence, but from the moment that he got that confidence, I want to say, what was it, week 12, week 11 last year? Yeah, I mean, there weren't very, very many better wide receivers over the course of week 11 to week 17 last year than Christian Watson. And it's just, it wouldn't surprise me to see, like you said, a lot of what Amon-Ra did was touchdown based, and he came out and said, I'm the wide receiver one on this team. I'm the guy that you need to be thrown to. And they never looked back. And I agree with you 100%. I think Jordan Love has the capability of feeding Christian Watson to help Christian Watson be a top 10 wide receiver.
Yeah, absolutely. So who is your biggest faller?
Well, with the news of his hamstring injuries and the news of Matthew Stafford considering this to be his last year, I'm not sure that anybody will fall farther than Cooper Kupp. It's quite possible that he doesn't play for the first 6 weeks this year. And he is getting up there in age. Next year, obviously, he's going to be another year older. Matthew Stafford may not be on the team. Who knows what direction that team goes in next year? They're already trading away pieces. They very well may be in another rebuild mode come next year. I don't think that he should be drafted as maybe even a wide receiver 2 next year. Now, that's not saying that he won't produce that, but would you rather draft a guy who produces wide receiver 1 for 1 year, or a guy that produces wide receiver 2 for 10 years?
Right.
And that's what it's going to come down to. Would I rather this young guy who will be in the league for the next 10 years, or Cooper Kupp who may be in the league 1 more year?
All right. I'm going to cheat a little bit. So in my personal rankings, I have players 14 through 17 are Tyreek Hill, Cooper Kupp, Devontae Adams, and Stephon Diggs. And I think that's pretty close to where the consensus has these guys too. Maybe a little higher on some of them, maybe a little lower on some of the other ones. I think all these 4 guys, because of things that they don't even have any control of, which is
age,
father time, you've got a ton of young, potentially good or great wide receivers right behind them on these lists. We talked about Christian Watson, Jordan Addison, Quentin Johnson, Treylon Burks, Jerry Jeudy, Debo's still in the mix, I think. Michael Pittman, if most people are right about Anthony Richardson, Michael Pittman's going to shoot up in value. George Pickens, Jahan Dotson, the list goes on and on and on and on. And I think you could see a large number of these guys, if they produce this year, they can move ahead of all of those guys. I really think that that's a possibility. Every year that we do Dynasty football, we see more and more of a shift in people putting value in younger potential players with potential value. Every year, the veterans become worth less and less value. I think you feel the same way there,
definitely,
right, Luigi? And I just think that this is a kind of a period of time where you've got all these great superstars of not the past really, but of the present, that are going to be considered worth less than a whole clump of these guys that are right behind them. Now, some of these guys will fall off, of course, because not all of them are going to succeed. But I can see 60 to 70% of them succeeding. I think that's fair. So I think that all 4 of those guys who are currently in my top 17, I think all those guys could potentially might fall out of the top 25. It's possible.
Maybe even top 30.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of the veterans losing value and continuously losing value year after year has a lot to do with it. I feel like it's gotten a whole lot harder to trade for close to even value. Mm-hmm. The more people join Dynasty and the more Dynasty leagues that people add to their repertoire, the harder it is to trade with them. Everybody's always wanting to win a trade. I feel like, and while obviously I want to win a trade, I don't have to win a trade right now to win a trade in the future. But everybody seems to want to win the trade right now. So no, people are tending to draft veterans less and less because it's harder for them to trade those veterans later on down the road to quote unquote win the trade now. And that, I think that's a big problem with the dynasty community right now is it's hard to get anything done for even close to even value. Everybody has to blow the trade out of the water.
I don't think it's hard to get deals done for even value. I just think that everybody always wants to keep their younger assets, and nobody wants to trade their younger assets. Everybody wants to get rid of veterans, and it's not so much about even value as it is that I want this certain type of asset. Mm-hmm. Honestly, and I'm not going to say that I'm any different. I don't want. I want Christian Watson on the majority of my teams over Stephon Diggs right now. Mm-hmm. I just do. If I'm ready, absolutely, I think I'm one of the best teams in the league. I might trade Christian Watson for Stephon Diggs. But if I think I'm middle of the pack or borderline playoff team, give me Christian Watson. And I think that is everyone's in that mentality. And I kind of don't blame them for being that way because that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I definitely don't blame them for being that way. I wouldn't want to trade Devontae Adams. I wouldn't want to trade Christian Watson for Devontae Adams. I just wouldn't. There's no reason in my mind. Yeah. Devontae Adams has 2-3 more years left. And while we know what Devontae Adams is, we know he's a very productive wide receiver.
Right.
Christian Watson is going to be in the league for, we hope, 10 more years. And I would just rather have those additional 6-7 years of production.
But I think that's more the problem other than what you're saying with people always want to win a trade. I think it's more about people want to win the right pieces in a trade.
Well, I guess what my point was is even if a team is extremely win now, they're clearly the best team in the league.
They want Christian Watson
over Stephon Diggs. They still want Christian Watson over Stephon Diggs or Devontae Adams.
Even though we can agree that those guys are pretty much the same value, right?
Mm-hmm. Right now.
Diggs and Watson are pretty much the same value. But there are very few to no teams that are going to make that trade.
So teams are tending to shy away from those wide receivers or running backs or quarterbacks on the fear that maybe I'm not the best team this year, and then I'm just going to have a deteriorating asset on my team.
It's more about, again, less about the value, winning the trade in a value standpoint as is winning the trade as far as I get to keep the younger asset is what I think. Everybody's got the same strategy in Dynasty. And I don't know if I'm being honest with you, I don't know how we break that because it is easily the best strategy. Mm-hmm. After doing this for 6 years, I've had too many teams that I thought had 3 to 4 years of shelf life with 26, 27, 28-year-old guys, and just out of nowhere, it just goes away, almost unpredictably sometimes. So it's really, with that in mind, I hear, I feel like some people try to blame it on everyone else, like, oh, other people are the problem. Well, no, we're all part of the problem because none of us want to make these trades. First of all, I'm telling you right now, I have Devontae Adams ahead of Christian Watson in my rankings. Don't send me Devontae Adams for Christian Watson because I won't accept that. With pretty much every team I have, there might be 1 or 2 of my 20 teams where I am so close to winning. I think that I'm almost a shoe-in to win a championship. If I have Christian Watson, I might trade him for Devontae Adams. But even then, I'm probably going to be like, I can win a championship without him. And I just think that's everyone's mindset right now. So it is going to be interesting to see how Dynasty progresses going forward with everybody getting more intelligent and basically going with one strategy that is easily the best strategy. I think there's going to be ways for people to exploit that, but I'm not sure exactly in my own personal way that I look at things. I'm not sure I know how to do that as of yet.
I mean, there's definitely a way to exploit it that I can name off the top of my head, which is to draft all these veterans, win the championship, and then bounce because you're just an asshole. I mean, I've seen it happen. People compile their teams with with the Devontae Adams and the Stephon Diggs, win money, and then just leave.
Yeah, but you are and a lot of the people, most of the people in the Dynasty community, the people that we're talking about, we're not going to do
No,
that.
definitely not. I would never, ever do that.
We're not in it just for the money aspect of it. Now, I've had teams before that I sold out for veterans, and the run came to an end. But guess what? I'm rebuilding in those leagues now.
I have a league where I'm probably 6 years away from winning a championship.
Oh,
and,
I've a couple of them.
And I'm still in that league.
Superflex Invitational.
Yeah. And I'm in that league still. I mean, I probably have more of them. I just know one off the top of my head. I am a long way away from winning a championship. And I honestly, I considered leaving, but I've been in the league for multiple years. I haven't won a championship in that league.
I will say the only time that is acceptable, in my opinion, is if you're leaving for other reasons. I did have a couple of teams this past year that were with a pay-to-play website. I'm not going to name who it is, but a lot of you that are listening know the group that I'm talking about. And I decided last year I'm going to start phasing these teams out because the guy who's running the show is kind of a joke, in all honesty. So I have started phasing some of those leagues out, and I will never again join another one of those leagues. So you can bet your ass that I'm not going to. If I'm in a league with a commissioner that I enjoy and a group of people that I enjoy, I'm not going to get in there, draft a bunch of veterans, trade for a bunch of veterans, and then bounce as soon as my window's over. A perfect example of that would be the GA TV league that I'm in, where I won it a couple of years ago, decided to break my team down, and I'm still in there, and my team's awful. That's how it goes.
Yeah.
You win, you rebuild.
Yeah.
And
I did leave a lot of leagues this offseason, but I felt like, honestly, a lot of those leagues were good enough to win a championship. So it's not like I left those leagues in just a dumpster fire. I left leagues because don't try not to get too personal, but I was a little overwhelmed in the offseason. I honestly thought about leaving a lot more leagues.
Yeah. And anyone that says that there's not a good reason ever to leave a league, well, you're just wrong, because there are good reasons. I'm not, as Luigi was saying, he had like 7.
I think I had like 55.
You had like 55 leagues at one point, and that's just way too.
And I've cut about 20 of those total off.
Had to downsize. If you're in a league and the commissioner just isn't doing what they're supposed to, especially if you're paying for that service. Honestly, I hold commissioners to such a higher standard. If I'm paying them a rake. If you're paying them a rake and they're not getting the job done, and they're getting the job done not in a timely manner, then that is honestly the only reason I've ever left a league. And it's all this one group of leagues, and I'm not going to name it, but most of you that listen and know what I'm talking about. So where are we at now? We talked about who's going to fall the most.
Yeah, we're talking about that. We just need to talk about our bold prediction.
Oh, a bold prediction. Let's hear a bold prediction for the wide receiver position.
All right, my bold prediction. Drum roll. Jamar Chase has the best fantasy wide receiver season ever. Cooper Kupp just had it in 2021, and Jamar Chase is going to break it. I think it's 438 points is what Cooper Kupp had. I can just see Jamar Chase topping that. I think it's quite possible. He has 2,000 yards and 15 total touchdowns. I think sky's the limit for Jamar Chase. I think that offensive line got so much better. I think Joe Burrow, like we've talked about multiple times, is so much better than Matthew Stafford was a couple of years ago. I don't think that this is that bold of a prediction. I think it's something that could quite possibly happen.
Okay. My bold prediction is that Amon-Ra St. Brown replaces CeeDee Lamb as the wide receiver 3 in dynasty value come February of 2024. As I stated earlier, Amon-Ra is a guy that believe in mightily. I think Detroit that offense is going to get better. They're going to progress on what they did last year. They brought in a new piece in Jahmyr Gibbs, which I've already stated how much faith I have in him. I think that helps Amon-Ra because when has a running game not helped an elite wide receiver? It always helps.
Always opens up from over the top.
It always opens that up. I think that even though I'm not sure how good this guy actually is, I think that whenever oh my gosh, I can't think of his name. Williams, the wide receiver for them. What's his first name? Jameson. When Jameson Williams comes back from his suspension, I think he's good enough that takes some pressure off of Amon-Ra in the passing game, and Amon-Ra gets even better. I think Sam Laporta is just another weapon they added. So all of the things that we talked about earlier in the year that I think were bad moves by Detroit because they needed to address their defense, even though I don't think they were the best moves for that team, I think that they squarely benefit both Jared Goff and Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to have a big year, and that's why I bought him in the auction this weekend.
Yeah.
All right, let's finish up with the tight ends. Who do we think is the current tight end as far as consensus dynasty value?
I mean, I think it's still Kyle Pitts right now. I don't necessarily have him as my tight end one. I mean, at some point he needs to start showing us, why we're drafting him a tight end one, and I don't think he's shown it yet.
Well, I think it's probably Kyle Pitts. I think that there's an argument maybe that Mark Andrews might be the consensus tight end one. I don't know what the exact numbers show. It's one of those two guys, but probably you're right at Kyle Pitts.
Yeah.
Who will finish as the tight end one? I think that we are both going to have the same answer here as far as production goes this year.
With the news of the Travis Kelce injury, I actually changed my answer. If Travis Kelce hadn't been injured,
my answer was this guy before the Travis Kelce injury. I'll just say.
Well, I would say Travis Kelce before the injury. With the injury, I'm not sure when he's going to be back, and even when he comes back, is that knee still going to bother him? Honestly, I don't remember which knee it was. If it was the left knee, it worries me a whole lot more because he has had a lot of issues with that left knee in the past.
Right.
So if it was the left knee, it worries me a lot more than if it was the right knee. But I'm still not sure how explosive he's going to be when he comes back because he's going to miss a few weeks of training and all that stuff. So my answer right now is T.J. Hawkinson.
Yep, that would have been my answer even before the Kelce injury. I think this is the year that Kelce gets overtaken for number one in tight end production. I know that sounds easy to say now, but I have receipts from people that know that I've said this, been saying this for weeks now.
Correct.
I believe in that offense with Justin Jefferson and now Jordan Addison that Kirk Cousins is going to have a sensational year, and I think that T.J. Hawkinson is going to be one of the biggest benefactors from that. Justin Jefferson is going to get his. Don't get me wrong. I still think he's going to be the wide receiver one, but I think we all expect that. T.J. Hawkinson is the guy that, although we expect him to be one of the top guys, I don't think that there are very many people that are predicting him to be the tight end one this year in production. I just think that all the tools are there. I think Kirk Cousins is going to have a great year, and with that being said, I know that this is going to be very controversial, but I think Kirk Cousins is going to be in the MVP conversation.
I think it's very possible.
I don't think he'll win it, but I think he's going to be in the conversation because I think that the passing numbers out of that offense are just going to be insane this year. So that brings us on. Who do we think the QB1 in February will be?
Or tight end one.
Or tight end one, my bad. I'm going up the same prompt here.
Yeah. This one I really struggle with because, like you said, it's possible that Mark Andrews. It's possible it's Mark Andrews. It's possible it's T.J. Hawkinson. Mm-hmm. For the sake of arguing, I'm gonna say it's still Kyle Pitts. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna hope that he has the year that finally breaks him out. So I'm gonna say it's Kyle Pitts, but we'll get to my bold prediction here in a little bit. I don't think it's gonna happen.
So I want to say T.J. Hawkinson based on everything that I just said, but I think Kyle Pitts will do enough this year to maintain his tight end 1 position, and I think Hawkinson will be squarely behind him at number 2 whenever February rolls around. Okay, most tight end shares. Who you got?
So I have 10 Cade Otton shares. I picked him up a lot in like the end of the second round last year. I just felt like going into Tampa Bay, there wasn't a clear tight end 1 because they had Kyle Rudolph, and I think that's it. I think they had can't remember his name, but one of the other guys that's been there for a while. They had him as their supposed tight end 1, but whenever Cade Otton was drafted, I just felt like there was a clear path for him to be the tight end 1 on Tampa. And I was getting him in the middle of the second round, end of the second round. I felt like the value there was too good.
Yeah. So my technical answer is Trey McBride. I have 7 shares of him, which is a 35% share stake. And I do love Trey McBride, and I did target him in the rookie draft, second rounds of rookie drafts last year. But it feels like a little bit of cheating because I got all my shares of Trey McBride are, cheap, obviously, because he's cheap.
Yeah.
But I do love him, and we may talk about him later as well. Right behind Trey McBride is George Kittle. I have 6 shares of him. I was a big George Kittle guy during his heyday. I still am a big George Kittle guy when he's on the damn field. And the problem with my shares of Kittle now is some of these teams have transitioned into win later teams, and I just refuse to trade George Kittle for what people are willing to pay for him. Yeah. I can't do George Kittle for 2 seconds. It's not a situation I ever see myself in. I would rather him rot on my bench than to trade him for that little. But in the leagues where I've tried to trade him, you just can't get a first for him. Or if you can get a first, it's clearly the guy who is going to finish with the 111 or 112, and you're still not even sure if that's enough, So the one thing I will say about George Kittle in closing is George Kittle is the most frustrating and also brings you the most joy at the same time of any player in the history of fantasy football, in my opinion. And what I mean by that is, we obviously know how hurt George Kittle's been over the last 3, 4, 5 years, maybe. I don't know how long it's been. It's been a while. We know how hurt he's been, and you can't really count on him. But my gosh, when he plays, you just win. You just win those games, man. You just do. So he was healthy for the playoffs last year, and because he was healthy, I had a really good fantasy playoffs. Mm-hmm. And I was excited about my shares on win later teams because he was just a week or so ago. He was coming into the season healthy, and I'm like, yes, he's going to come out. He's going to be healthy for 3 or 4 games. People are going to see that he's still George Kittle, and I'm going to be able to get a little bit more value than he's going for right now. But then I just read on the injury report a couple of days ago that there's a possibility he's not going to play week 1. Mm-hmm. So we're right back to square one with George Kittle. And, the guy's won me a lot of money, but he's also caused me a lot of heartache at the same time.
Yeah, and then like you said, you really can't find trade partners with him because everyone's they either only want to give an early second or an extremely late first.
Or 2 mid-seconds.
Yeah, and it's just not worth it. I'd rather let him die on my roster.
Exactly. Yeah. There's very few players I've gotten to that because you could usually get enough value. It's like, okay, it's time to move on from this guy. I'm getting what he's worth, or I feel like that if I have the pick here and this player hits, I can get some of my investment back. You're just not going to get your investment back with George Kittle. And if you're not okay with that, then that's why you still have 6 shares of him like I do.
I'm going to say this, and I don't know if this is completely accurate, so don't take this for gospel, but I think you could have gotten more for Tom Brady his last year than you can for George Kittle right now.
Probably, yeah. You can't get anything for him. I send people George Kittle for like a mid to like playoff caliber teams. Mm-hmm. I say George Kittle for you're late first and you don't have a tight end. Your tight end is very mediocre, and they're just like, laugh out loud. Like, that's a terrible offer that I'm asking for. And I'm just like, okay, well, I mean, maybe I'm in the wrong here.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe George Kittle's not worth a first, but to me, I still can't trade him for like 2 seconds. I just can't do it. So let's move on to most rookie tight end shares.
So I love me some baby Gronk. I've got 14 shares of Michael Mayer, and I'm the type of guy who, as you can tell with my 10K Dotton shares, I will draft tight ends in the second round. Early second round is kind of where I've been able to get Michael Mayer a lot. And they will die on my roster because there is some point where tight ends can break out at any time. Darren Waller's a perfect example where he was 5-6 years in the league before he had his first 1,000-yard season. It can happen at any time, and I'm willing to let these guys just rot on my roster. And I'm not going to cut them. Like, these guys are going to stay on my roster. They're going to take up a roster.
Give me some
spot.
more examples. Who guys you're talking about?
Trey McBride's another example. I have a lot of shares of Trey McBride.
Jelani Woods.
Jelani Woods and Kalen Granson. Like,
Yeah.
I've got those guys on a ton of rosters.
Yeah.
Just because at any time these guys can break out. David Njoku is another example. You know, he hasn't really had a great year ever.
He's got value now,
But he's got value now. But I've got him on my roster in a lot of leagues. I probably have 8 shares of David Njoku. Just guys that I'm going to keep on my roster because anytime their value can just boost through the moon. And I'm still going to keep them. Like, I'm not going to trade them at that point.
I have a lot of shares of these guys you're talking about too, because you get them late in the second.
cheap.
Sometimes you get them in the third even. Like guys like Jelani Woods, I have 6 shares of. Conquo, I have 3 shares of. And
Conquo is a great example.
These are not guys I bought since their value went up. These are guys I bought when they were cheap, right? Schoonmaker, I managed to pick up 4 shares of him. A guy that I think people are sleeping on mightily is Washington.
Darnell
Washington, yes.
You're getting him in the end of the third round.
Sometimes
almost.
in the 4th.
Yeah, smash accept that.
And the talent is there. I just don't see why we're taking the hot wide receiver that people are all of a sudden talking about. Like the damn guy for the Patriots that's come out of nowhere.
Demario Douglas.
Why the hell would you take Demario Douglas over Darnell Washington? I don't get it. And now that I've said that, Demario Douglas is going to be a wide receiver 2 this year.
From your lips to God's ears.
Yeah. But I don't understand why we do things like that. We change our mind because, Pat Freiermuth is a reason not to draft Darnell Washington. Pat Freiermuth is a reason to draft Darnell Washington, in my opinion. Darnell Washington was obviously drafted for the reason. To me, the reason is because they don't want to pay Pat Freiermuth when it comes time to pay Pat Freiermuth. But even if Freiermuth stays there, you can have 2 successful tight ends on a team. I'm getting off on a bit of a soapbox here. So let me get to mine. Mine is Dalton Kincaid. 5 shares of Dalton Kincaid. 4 of those shares, I'm happy to say, are in tight end premium leagues, where I think he is clearly the 7th guy, and should have been the 7th guy in every tight end premium draft.
I agree.
I know Addison and QJ are more talented, but have more upside in non-tight end premium leagues, and I took those guys over Kincaid in non-tight end premium leagues. But with the extra point per reception, I just don't see how you take anybody out of that top 6 over Dalton Kincaid.
And what's crazy is I have a ton of these Michael Mayer shares. A ton of them. I'd say 10 of them are in tight end
because people are taking Racy Rice
and Jalen Hyatt and people like that over him, and I'm just like, I will take the guy that's has the higher upside in tight end premium leagues. He just does. Yeah. He was an excellent receiver in college. He's a great blocker. Yeah. He goes to a team that is devoid of a lot of receiving talent. I mean, other than Devontae Adams, who really is on that team? I'm a big Jacoby Myers fan. Yeah. I think Michael Mayer is a whole lot more talented than Jacoby Myers is.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that there's been enough of these hits over the years too. Even though Pitts has struggled, we're still talking about him as the dynasty tight end 1, right? Mark Andrews was there was a tight end drafted on the same team in the first round that year. So if you picked up Mark Andrews in the 3rd and 4th round in rookie drafts that year, which I know for a fact that people did, because I did one in one league. Congratulations, T.J. Hawkinson. He was more of a first-round guy, but he
wasn't the tight end one off the board though, because it was Noah Fant.
It was Noah Fant, yeah. But he's held his value, and sometimes you miss on these guys. But when you miss on them, for 3rd-round picks or late seconds.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a. I've always wondered why we don't value these tight ends more, especially in tight end premium leagues.
And tight ends have such good shelf life normally. Like we're going to see some of these tight ends. Michael Mayer, for instance, is probably going to be in the league, even if he's not a starter. He's going to be in the league for 10 to 12 years.
Yeah.
Because good tight ends that can block and can catch, they're just going to be in the league. They're going to be on the line, so one way or another. It's a perfect example. Isaiah Likely. Isaiah Likely is not the most talented guy, but you bet your butt that he's going to be on that field in those two tight end sets.
I think a perfect example of this is, okay, so in Dallas, you've got Luke Schoonmaker and you've got Jake Ferguson both, right? They're both basically free. I mean, you get Schoonmaker in the 3rd round of a rookie draft. You can get Ferguson for a late second is probably the high end of what you're going to have to pay. You're telling me that we don't think that one of those two guys is going to have in the next, maybe not this year, but in the next year or two, that they're not going to have similar to Dalton Schultz type production in that offense? I think that it's pretty close to a given that that's going to happen. So why wouldn't you spend a total of a late second, a 3rd to get both of those guys?
Correct. 100%. I agree with that.
All right, now on to some tight ends that we don't have very many shares of. And this is the opposite of the running. Remember when I said on the running backs that it's all of them? Well, for the tight ends, it's basically none of them. There's some circumstances where I don't have any shares, like Goddard's a circumstance, Ingram and Njoku are circumstances. This one really bugs me. I only have one share of Luke Musgrave just because I constantly was getting sniped on him in rookie drafts this year. But for the most part, I'm heavily invested in almost all of the tight ends because I believe in tight ends and tight end premium. I even believe in them more in non-tight end premium than most people do. I still think they give you a positional advantage. It's not the same, obviously, but I still think that, if you've got top-tier guys in non-tight end premium, it matters. So it's basically all of them, but like I said, Goddard, Ingram, and Njoku, just because of circumstance, don't have a share of those guys.
I tend to pass on tight ends early and draft tight ends more in like the 2nd and 3rd round. So guys like Kyle Pitts, I don't think I have very many shares of. I'm pretty sure I only have one share of T.J. Hawkinson.
Yeah. I'm rocking shares of both of those guys.
Yeah. It's just I do quantity over quality, I guess. I spend all my first round picks and my early 2nd round picks on wide receivers or quarterbacks, and then in the 2nd and 3rd round, I tend to draft like K-Dot and like Isaiah Likely, guys like that. Those are the tight ends that I tend to target. Yeah. The one exception, honestly, has been Dalton Kincaid. If I was at the 107, I was drafting KK pretty much right off the bat, just immediately in tight end premiums. So I'm a little bit of the opposite of you. My tight ends that I tend to draft, and honestly, I tend to do this too much. Once I like a guy, I tend to get him a lot, as apparent with having 14 shares of Michael Mayer.
Yeah.
So
you don't target him as much in the rookie drafts?
I don't target them as much early in the rookie drafts. So while you have a ton of T.J. Hawkinson and Kyle Pitts shares, I'm going to end up having a ton of Musgraves and Schoonmakers and guys like that.
I have those too.
Right. Well, I guess I have more of the I'll take 3 tight ends later in the draft, while you may only take 1 early in the draft.
So this is an example of something I did last year, or something I've done, and you're going to remember this, and it doesn't look great right now, but I traded up from like the 202 to the 110 in the tight end premium. This was last year's rookie draft, not this year's. I traded from 202 to 110 to secure Trey McBride, and right now that looks not
great.
But
in 2 years.
All it takes, one breakout year, and that looks like a steal.
Especially if they end up getting Caleb Williams.
Yeah.
Can you imagine Caleb Williams starting to Trey?
Wow.
Trey McBride is the starter.
I haven't even thought about that.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
I mean, not that Kyler Murray is not a good quarterback, because I do think Kyler Murray is a good quarterback.
Yeah.
We haven't been able to see Kyler Murray really with Trey McBride, because when Trey McBride was on the field more at the end of last year, Kyler Murray wasn't. So I think we haven't even seen close to what Trey McBride is capable of in the NFL. We're going to see that one way or another next year, because I don't think we're going to get to see it this year. But the thing is, Trey McBride is 22 years old?
Yeah.
He's got 10 years in this league. Yeah. He's going to have an elite quarterback. Okay, he's going to have a really good quarterback or an elite quarterback come next year. One way or another. It's going to be Kyler Murray.
It's going to be Kyler or Caleb.
Or Caleb Williams.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think he has the ability to shoot way up the charts into a top 10 tight end.
Yeah, and that's why you take gambles like
exactly.
That. That's why
100%.
I take it. That's why I take it.
Right. Like because the 1 through 6 for tight ends, that's pretty consistent. Yeah. Anything after that, pick a name out of a hat.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Who will be the highest riser at the position this year?
I think it'll be David Njoku. I think we've already seen a little bit of that happening. I think he's going to,
from a value standpoint.
Okay. Yeah, because I think slowly we're seeing him go up the charts in terms of where he's drafted and what people are willing to pay for him. And I think after this year, come February, he'll have obviously his best year yet. He'll be tied to Deshaun Watson for a couple years. I think people will be more willing to draft him right around that tight end 7, tight end 8 value, as opposed to right now, he's probably tight end 15, tight end 16.
Yeah. I want to say Trey McBride, but I think that Joshua Dobbs is going to quell some of that progression this year.
If we were doing that, if we were talking about this time next year, I would 100% say Trey McBride.
Yes, I agree with you. So I'm going to push him to the back burner, and maybe he'll be for next year. I think the guy that's come on very strong lately, and he was actually announced as the starter as a rookie, which I think was a bit of a surprise in my opinion. But I think that in the with a new quarterback that hasn't really latched on to any favorite targets yet, I kind of look for Luke Musgrave to move up the charts and potentially be like a low-end tight end 1 in terms of value come February. I could actually see, and right now I have Mayer and Laporta both ahead of him easily, and I wouldn't, as I'm about to say this, don't send me Luke Musgrave for either one of those guys in a trade, because I will auto-reject it. But I see a scenario where Luke Musgrave can move ahead of both of those guys. He can move ahead of a guy like Trey McBride. He can move ahead of guys like Okonkwo and Dulcich if he has a good enough season out there with Jordan Love. If he shows some promise, we know that rookie tight ends don't have to set the world on fire to gain value. They just have to show some promise, right? Mm-hmm. So I think Luke Musgrave is the guy that I'm looking forward to that could be a potential high riser. All right, Luigi, who will fall the most at the tight end position in value?
Well, it is with a heavy heart that I think that Kyle Pitts continues to underperform and actually falls out of the top tight ends. Like I said, there's about 6 tight ends that we consider to be the elite tight ends, or the best of the tight ends. There's really only one elite tight end. And honestly, that ties in with my bold prediction with tight ends as well, that he underperforms and falls out of that tier of being one of those top 6 tight ends drafted. I think
you think Pitts falls out of the top 6?
I do. My gosh. Yeah, I think he underperforms.
That is bold.
I'm not a Desmond Ridder guy. I've never been a Desmond Ridder guy. I think that Pitts still has yet to really show us that he's worth being drafted in that range. I mean, Mark Andrews outperforms him every year. Hawkinson outperforms him every year. Kelsey outperforms him every year. Like there's all of these guys that just continuously outperform him. And I haven't seen enough from him. I don't think he has a stable enough quarterback to provide that for him. So it seriously wouldn't shock me that he does that. He falls out of the top 6.
So for the sake of argument, how bad would Kyle Pitts' season have to be for that to be true? What are we talking about here?
I mean, I think he has to be one of the top tight ends. I think if he's not one of the top tight ends, then he will fall out of it.
So you think if he finishes tight end 9, you think he falls out of the top 6?
He falls out of the top 6. Yep.
I don't agree with that.
Yep.
I think he's got enough between draft capital and what people have spent on him in the past. I think that he has to have a really wretched season to fall out of the top 6.
I mean, it's 3 years in.
Yeah.
At this point, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
If he finishes as tight end 9, it's 3 years in. He has never had a great season.
Well, that's not true.
His rookie season was not great.
1,000 yards.
But it wasn't. But it wasn't
great for a rookie tight end.
It's great for a rookie tight end, but it's not great. Doing something once does not make you great.
That's true.
Doing something once
true.
out of 3 years, and I get that this is going to be the third offense that he's been in. Technically, this is going to be the third offense that he's been in. I do understand that, but it's hard for me to value somebody. If Bijan Robinson is the exact same way, he has 1,000-yard season and then underperforms for the next 2. I don't care where he was drafted by the Falcons. I'm not gonna be able to rank him in my top 3 or 4 or 5 of guys who are continuously outperform him, and that's where I see Kyle Pitts headed, is a downward trajectory behind guys who continuously outproduce him.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm ready to piss some people off.
Let's do this.
So I already felt this way before the recent news, and the recent news that we've heard in the last few days has made me feel even stronger about this position. I think this is the last ride for Travis Kelce as a elite dynasty tight end as far as dynasty value goes. I think this is his last ride. I had already traded down to 1 share of Travis Kelce before the season started because I kind of feel like this is the point where you want to get out from under Travis Kelce, because I think, and only because of Father Time, he's about to fall off the proverbial cliff. He's going to be 35 next year, right?
He's going to be 34 next year.
He's going to be 34 next year.
Mm-hmm.
And do I think Travis Kelce will still be a very good NFL tight end? And do I still think that he might potentially be helping the Chiefs win Super Bowls for 2 or 3 more years? I absolutely do. I think the production that he has had over the last 5-6 years is going to become difficult at the age that he is currently.
He just won't be as explosive. There comes a time where you fall off that cliff.
He can't. And as we know, his value, because of his age, his value is always going to be less than it should be, right? Mm-hmm. So Travis Kelce, you can get Travis Kelce for a first and a second, maybe, in most leagues. Mm-hmm. If you've got a team that's not competing that has Kelce, as productive as Travis Kelce's been, he should be worth 2 firsts right now,
easily.
But he's just not.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that just only gets worse. Father Time's caught up with this injury. I haven't checked in the last couple of days. His value has to have come down, right? He's got
maybe slightly.
You think just slightly?
Because it's possible that he only misses 1 game. I think now it's everything is just so in the dark.
Yeah.
If 2 weeks from now he still hasn't stepped back on the field, I think there'll be a lot more questions. But missing 1 game is not extremely out of the ordinary.
I think there are a crazy number of tight ends behind him on this list that could move ahead of him as far as value goes. I don't really think it has anything to do with what Kelce does. It has more to do with what kind of season they have. I'll give you a guy off the top of my head. If Okonkwo has 75% of the production Travis Kelce has this year, he's going to move ahead of him in value.
If he has 75%, he's probably the tight end 6.
That's what I'm saying. Even if he has 50% of the value of Kelce, he might move ahead of him because of age. Mm-hmm. So guys like
Dulcich,
Okonkwo, Ingram's still young. Maybe not Ingram. Maybe that's too.
Yeah.
Maybe that's too far.
Njoku,
K-Dot, and like you said earlier, I don't look for that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that Cade Otton has 60 catches and 800 yards and 6 touchdowns this year. You don't think people are going to take him next year over Travis Kelce in drafts? They're gonna. They just are, unless Kelce comes out and has
1,500 yards,
1,600 yards again. Yeah, and
I don't think it'll happen.
Can't see that happening. Yeah. So I think that Travis Kelce could go from where do we consensus? Where do you think he is right
Probably
now?
tight end 3.
Tight end 3, maybe 4. I think he could fall out of the top 10 easily. I really do. Let me also say on top of that I fully expect George Kittle to fall right with him.
Definitely.
But
Darren Waller as well.
Yeah. But I think that the Kelce is the more shocking name there. I think everybody expects that Kittle and Waller are probably going to continue to fall. I think there's a certain group of people out there that think that Travis Kelce is invincible, and I don't agree with that. So let's move on to our bold prediction for the tight end position. Luigi, what do you got?
Well, I already said mine a few minutes ago, but I think Pitts just continues to underperform and falls out of the top 6.
Gotcha.
In dynasty value.
So mine probably isn't that bold, but I have a lot of conviction in it. I think Dalton Kincaid does enough as a rookie. And I'm talking about like maybe
50 catches, 700 yards.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that would be enough for him to move up and be the tight end 3 in terms of dynasty value. I think that if he has, like you said, that's a perfect number. It's exactly what I was thinking. 50 for 700. He could move right behind Kyle Pitts and TJ Hawkinson for me as the tight end 3, strictly off of just the fact that he's young and promising.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where we're at in dynasty. I would be absolutely shocked if Travis Kelce has more consensus value than Dalton Kincaid this time
next year.
Yeah, this time next year.
I agree with that.
Completely shocked.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it's possible that as of right now at this moment, if somebody drafted a team today, it's possible that they would take Dalton Kincaid over Travis Kelce.
I would. I'm not going to lie to you.
Mm-hmm.
I would have all summer long. And I know that's people will probably say that's crazy, but it's just that's just the way I like to draft. The only way I'm taking Travis Kelce in a startup right now is if he slipped to a round that he shouldn't have slipped in. And as we know, he just doesn't. For some reason, guys like Travis Kelce are worth more in a startup than they are after the startup's over.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Once the startup's over, oh, well, I took Travis Kelce in the 3rd round. Well, guess what? You can't even get 2 firsts for him now.
Mm-hmm.
That's his value.
Mm-hmm. You could have gotten so much more for that actual pick than you can for
Travis
Kelce.
Yeah. And I've never understood that about startup. Startup math is just different for some reason. But it's absolutely true. Go out there, listeners, and try to trade Travis Kelce right now.
For the amount of value where you drafted him.
Yeah. The injury obviously is going to hurt that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But even try to get, if you took him in the 3rd round of startup, try to get 6th round startup value. You can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not, those trades aren't out there. So, Luigi, do we want to maybe throw out some Super Bowl predictions before we end this?
Yeah. So I think we will probably both have the same AFC team. It wouldn't shock me.
I think we're going to have the same on both.
You think we're going to have the same on both?
Yeah, I think we're going to have the same winner too.
Probably. I think the Super Bowl will feature how I thought the Super Bowl would be featured last year.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be the Cincinnati Bengals versus the Philadelphia Eagles. I think the Eagles are the team to beat in the NFC. And I think with all of our predictions in the AFC and Joe Burrow being an MVP caliber and Jamar Chase having the best NFL season for wide receiver of all time, I just don't see any team being able to beat them. They've bolstered up on their offense. They added defense in the draft, and just another year in, they were one play away from beating the Chiefs last year and making it to back-to-back Super Bowls. And I think they've gotten better and the Chiefs have gotten worse.
So this is officially the Joe Burrow Fantasy Podcast Club.
Go Tigers.
because I just think I'm going to take it from a different approach. You long-suffering Cincinnati Bengals fans, your time has finally come, in my opinion. This is the year. Joe Burrow is going to right all those wrongs. Jamar Chase is legit 1B to Justin Jefferson's 1A. Higgins, the whole offense. Mixon's back, which I'm not a huge Mixon guy, but it's better than just bringing in a random, right? The offensive line is supposedly better, and I don't know that it matters if it's better. He's done it before without an offensive line. He can do it again.
This offensive line is much better than where they were last year. With they're healthy now. Are they going to stay healthy? That's a different story. If they were healthy last year, they beat the Chiefs last year, and it's just that plain and simple.
I do think that part of the reason why I believe it's the Bengals is because of what you're saying about the attrition over on the Kansas City side. No Chris Jones to start the year. Who knows if he's going to be there all year? We don't know. Who knows how serious the Travis Kelce injury actually is? And the Bengals have been known to beat the Chiefs more often than not when the Chiefs are at full strength. So to me, it's just the Bengals year. I feel like the Bengals showed in that. Let's be honest, the unfortunate ending to that regular season game between the Bengals and the Bills last year. The Bengals were kicking their ass before that happened, and then they beat them again in the playoffs. So to me, it's kind of almost laughable that people think that Buffalo is going to be able to overtake the Kansas City.
Buffalo's gotten worse this year.
I feel like they have. I think it's definitely Cincinnati in the AFC, and I think that the NFC is still in the position where outside of the 49ers and the Eagles, who else could it be? I mean,
Dallas, their defense is incredible.
Yeah, but it feels like there's always something with Dallas, and I love Dak Prescott. But with that team as a whole, it just feels like there's always something holding them back. And I agree with you that they should be in the mix, but I don't think they will be.
Yeah, I mean, I think the three teams, if I had to bet money, I think the five teams that are going to be, it's going to be some combination of these five teams. It's going to be the 49ers, the Cowboys, the Eagles, and then the Chiefs and the Bengals. It's going to be some combination of those five in the Super Bowl.
I know this is going to sound like blasphemy, but I just don't. I don't think the Chiefs would even be my second pick in the AFC, if I'm being honest with you.
Oh, you don't think the Chiefs are the second best team in the AFC?
Well, they might be the second best team on paper, but I just think that there's going to be enough distractions there with Jones and the possible Travis Kelce injury. I can't tell you which team I think will overtake them, but I could see the Chiefs get knocked off before the AFC Championship game. I really could. Maybe it's the Jacksonville Jaguars. I have a lot of faith in Trevor Lawrence. Maybe because they're in a weak division, maybe Jacksonville rings up and they end up with the 1 or the 2 seed, and the Chiefs have to come to them this year. And last year the Jacksonville wasn't that far off from upsetting them in Arrowhead.
Yeah, they were right there.
I just think that, and I think Mahomes is going to be back. This isn't the end of the dynasty by any stretch of the imagination. I just think that they need to do more with that roster before they can get back to that level again.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely holes. I don't think their offensive line is good.
No.
And they showed in the Super Bowl against the Bucs that they do need somewhat of an offensive line. I mean, you can have a great offense. They had Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill, and they put up, 10 points that game? Because they couldn't stop anybody from coming through their offensive line. And I think that's exactly how it's gonna be this year. I mean, I think that the Bengals defense is really good. I think the Jaguars defense is their defensive front is pretty good. I mean, the Titans deep front is really good, and I
don't
mean,
see them being a big factor.
I don't. But when they're going to play each other and they're going to beat up on each other.
A team we haven't even mentioned yet, and they have a really good defense. And I'm not sure that I believe what I'm saying here, but what about the Jets?
I mean, New England. New England probably has a top 10 defense.
That's true.
Not that I think that New England makes the playoffs, but in the off chance that they do, I mean, there you go, right there. Two more elite defenses.
That's a tough out. That's a tough out if Kansas City has to play a defensive like that. Yeah, I agree with you.
I mean, they're smoldering. Everywhere they're smoldering because that's all that they spend draft picks and money on is their defense.
Yeah.
So, who wins it, Joe?
Oh, I think we kind of alluded to that already. It's Joe Burrow's year.
Joe Burrow.
It's Cincinnati's year. The Bengals finally get it done. I'll be super jealous as a Carolina Panther fan because that's one more team that has won a Super Bowl and we haven't. But no, I'm actually on the absolutely crazy chance that we are actually really, really good and make the Super Bowl. I'm rooting for the Bengals this year to win the Super Bowl. That's what I would like to see. It's what I think is going to happen, and it's what I would like to see happen.
I think you guys have a better chance of making the playoffs than we do. But either way, I would still root for the Bengals in the Super Bowl. I mean, obviously we would have to play them in the AFC Championship game, but I'd be really, really torn on who I would cheer for there if we played each other. Not that that's ever going to happen. I mean, I think our chances of making the playoffs are extremely low and making to the AFC Championship game are even lower.
We could sneak into the playoffs, but I don't even look for that to happen. It was more of a just in case.
Right.
Obviously, everyone knows I'm not going to cheer for anyone over the Panthers.
Right.
So, yeah, but Joey B and the Bengals will probably be my hope to win the Super Bowl until they actually win it.
Yeah. I think of your team and my team and the Bengals. The Bengals definitely easily have the best chance, and we'll probably win one before our two teams.
Oh.
Not that my team hasn't won one a few times.
I think the Bengals will probably win 2 or 3 before either one of our teams win another one.
I don't look for us to win another one for a long time.
So, no. I love Bryce Young, but I'm not looking for a Super Bowl in the next 4 to 5 years. Hopefully he gets there eventually, but I'm not looking for one anytime soon. We got anything else to talk about here, Luigi?
I don't think so. I think we've pretty well touched on everything. You said your MVP, my MVP, probably be Joe Burrow as well. I would say that would happen. I don't think he needs to have the best quarterback season ever to do that. I think it's quite possible that they could win 15 games this year and not have to have the best quarterback season. Like I said earlier, I think that'll be Justin Herbert, but I'm not sure how many wins that'll translate into.
All right, then. Well, with that being said, this has been the Dynasty Dreamerz podcast, episode number 16. This is Joe Galloway and Luigi Federico signing off. Everybody enjoy the games. Enjoy your Dynasty and fantasy football season. We'll talk to you somewhere down the line.
Merry Christmas.